The struggle for the Strait continues. President Donald Trump orders $50 million for research of psychedelics for treatments, and America's talking firearms. This is the Center Square Daily for Monday, April 20th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Well, the pain at the pump remains elevated as talks to strike a deal with Iran are set to reconvene this week ahead of Wednesday's ceasefire expiration. President Donald Trump, he issued fresh threats Sunday on the Islamic Republic. Trump says Iran violated the ceasefire agreement when it fired on cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz Saturday, as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed it closed the vital waterway, a big reversal of a Friday announcement that had agreed to open the strait. Now, the Center Square's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief Sarah Roderick Fitch reports representatives will arrive Monday for those talks as negotiations continue. The president, he posted to social media over the weekend, quote, "We're offering a very fair and reasonable deal." And he says that he hopes that they take it because if they don't, he says the United States is going to, quote, "knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran," end quote. Now, while there was some relief in gas prices, they barely nudged downward during that nearly 2-week ceasefire. AAA shows that the current average for regular is $4.04 a gallon. That's down from last week, but up from last month and up about 30% from a year ago when it was $3.10 for an average. Now, while prices have decreased by roughly 7 cents over the last week, they remain near the highest levels since August 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In June 2022, about 4 months after that invasion, the price of gasoline in the U.S. reached roughly $5.01 per gallon, which would be about $5.46 per gallon today if you adjust for inflation. Now, in 2008, when the U.S. imported significant amounts of oil, the price per gallon reached $4.11. And in today's dollars, that would be more than $6 per gallon. Now, after adjusting for inflation, U.S. prices remain relatively low when compared to past crises. But one question persists: why energy dominance hasn't lowered the price, or at least yet? The Center Square's Alton Wallace reports, even though the U.S. is the world's largest oil producer, crude oil is a globally traded commodity. And American producers sell their oil to the highest bidders worldwide. And if conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, or in the Middle East, threatens 20% of the world's supply, then global traders bid up prices everywhere. Walton also goes on to tell us that analysts at J.P. Morgan and the NRDC point to recent U.S. military conflicts with Iran as the primary driver of today's gasoline prices. Since the time the war began, price for the benchmark West Texas intermediary, it went from $70 to about $120 per barrel, adding an estimated $153 per household in monthly fuel costs. There's also bottlenecks in the refining process. Getting oil out of the ground, that's just part of it. But you've got refineries across the country and some planned closures, such as Phillips 66's Los Angeles facility, and a recent accident at the Valero refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, causing all kinds of curtailment of some production. Now, what is it like around the world? Of course, we're seeing those elevated prices here, but in Paris, France, if you were going to get a gallon of gas in France, it would come out to about $8.20 in U.S. dollars. In London, it's about $7.50 per gallon. In Japan, you're looking at about $4.75 U.S. dollars per gallon of gas. And in South Korea, it's about $5.23 per gallon in U.S. dollars. So why is the pain at the pump feeling so acute at this time? Well, even if prices aren't at a 40-year record, you've got the current spike and the significance of it at a rapid pace, and you're feeling that at the pump. Gasoline prices rose very rapidly during the 7 weeks after the war started with Iran. And this is just some of the analysis you can find at thecentersquare.com. We'll keep you updated on both what's happening with those Iran talks and the ongoing crunch of those energy prices. Now, the latest executive order from President Donald Trump aims at accelerating medical treatments for serious mental illness. Signed Saturday in the Oval Office, that order calls for new medical research and treatments based on psychedelic drugs, directing the Food and Drug Administration to fast-track review of certain breakthrough therapies of psychedelics and signaling new support for drugs like ibogaine and other compounds to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and addiction, especially among those veterans in the United States. Here's what President Donald Trump had to say Saturday.
This order will clear away unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles, improve data sharing among the FDA and the Department of Veterans Affairs, and facilitate fast rescheduling of any psychedelic drugs that become FDA approved. And we think many of them will go very quickly. And veterans with traumatic brain injuries underwent, it's called ibogaine treatment. Ibogaine. Remember the name. Is that pronounced relatively properly, would you say?
Yes.
I don't want to get it wrong. Ibogaine, because it's so important, and experienced an 80 to 90% reduction in symptoms of depression and anxiety within 1 month. Can I have some, please? I'll take it. I'll take whatever it takes. I don't have time to be depressed. You know, if you stay busy enough, maybe that works too.
As you saw, right behind the president was popular podcaster and comedian Joe Rogan, who's championed this issue for years. He said that he shared with the president statistics of people who've used such treatments with psychedelic drugs like ibogaine or other types of drugs, helped with their depression and substance abuse.
I sent him that information. The text message came back, sounds great. Do you want FDA approval? Let's do it. And it was literally that quick. These drugs are illegal not because they're harmful. They're illegal because of the 1970 Controlled Substances Act that was passed by the Richard Nixon administration. They did it to target the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. It's not because these drugs harm people. And for 56 years, we've lived under those terrible conditions. We're free of that now. We're free of that now, thanks to all these people that we see next to me, and thanks to President Trump.
So how are taxpayers impacted? Well, directly from the order, the President directs the Secretary of Health and Human Services through the Advanced Research Project Agency for Health to allocate at least $50 million from existing taxpayer funds to support and partner with state governments that have enacted or are in the process of developing programs to advance psychedelic drugs for serious mental illness, including through federal funding, technical assistance, and data sharing as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. So taxpayers will be paying for this through some federal agencies to boost psychedelic research of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, psilocybin, some refer to it as magic mushrooms, and ibogaine. Now, joining us to discuss this further is Eric Lionheart, a decorated Air Force combat controller and founder of the First There Foundation. Eric, I got to say, it wasn't on my bingo card for over the weekend to wake up Saturday and see Joe Rogan standing behind President Trump talking about psychedelics. Before we get your reaction to that, I want you to just give us a brief intro on your service and what brings you up here to us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Sure. A quick intro is I was an Air Force combat controller, which a lot of people do not know what that is. And to make it super quick, you take a Green Beret and a Navy SEAL, you smash them together, and you get one combat controller. There's about 300 to 350 of us per year, active duty. Now, the combat controller, what makes it so special and so limited out there in the Department of War is because we control the airspace. Anything that flies, we control. So let's just call that the fourth dimension. When we're not in a firefight, we're just a team. We're either breaching, driving, manning heavy weapons. You're just a team guy. And in Afghanistan, for example, where all my fighting was done, as soon as firefights kicked off or if someone was injured, I was calling on the radio, fighter jets, drones, bombers. If someone was injured, a medevac, like I said earlier. So the combat controller is very specialized. We only work with special forces. And I think that's why a lot of people don't know about us. And also the Air Force, for whatever reason, their PR doesn't like to advertise our capabilities.
So it's pretty remarkable the things I imagine that you've witnessed, that you've experienced, that you and your fellow soldiers in arms have experienced. Bring us to today. Here we are. We hear the president talking about Ibogaine. I never thought I'd hear a president talk about Ibogaine, let alone say, "Can I have some?" That's just one of these treatments that have been around for a while. How are these treatments beneficial or problematic for veterans suffering from PTSD, from veterans who are suffering from substance abuse or suicidal ideation?
Well, I'm with you. My phone was blowing up on Saturday. People were telling me to turn on TV because the president was talking about it. So, ibogaine is a little bit heavier plant medicine, as I like to call it, where for heavy addictions, opioids, and heavy addictions like heavy drinking and stuff like that. And the people that he had in the Oval Office, they spoke about that. I've never done ibogaine, but I've done what in their foundation, my foundation, we provide is plant medicine such as ayahuasca and psilocybin, which you referred to earlier. Now, these medicines have been around for centuries, and as Joe Rogan said in that clip you played, it became a class 1 drug after 1970 to restrict that. Now, the unfortunate part is that a lot of people have been suffering. Obviously, the suicide rates is big into, it's on the forefront. And every year it seems like the government talks about how suicide rates are a problem and we need to do something about it. But in my opinion, all they do is change the color of the poster and suicide rates continue. So now you have this president that's thinking outside the box, that's taking some initiative and taking action, saying, okay, I have all these people that tell me that plant medicine works. Well, let's give it a shot. So, I mean, it's a historic day, and it's huge for people like myself that have struggled with PTSD, depression. For me, with survivor's guilt as well. And once I found ayahuasca, it changed my life, and I'm living proof because I was suicidal. I hated my life, and now I'm sitting here with you.
Now, Eric, for people who don't know what a psychedelic drug like ayahuasca does, give us, I guess, the Reader's Digest version, the ayahuasca for dummies version, for those who have absolutely zero idea about this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's I think a lot of people in the conservative circles, there was some taboo to it, right? Because they thought, as a lot of us did, I grew up Catholic, but it was, hey, if you do this, you're doing drugs and you're sinning and you probably shouldn't do it. And it keeps a lot of people away. But ayahuasca, it's the scariest and the most beautiful thing I've ever done in my life. It's natural. It doesn't tax your organs as pharmaceuticals does. It's a sacred plant that's been around, and it comes from Peruvian or the Amazon jungle. And when you ingest it, you're in a room, it's very sacred. It's a ceremony, and it lasts between 4 to 6 hours, depending on the individual. And imagine you take a nap or you fall asleep in your bed. You can open your eyes and you know exactly where you are. But when you close your eyes and it's taking you, they call it a journey, it somehow knows exactly what's been troubling you, and it shows it to you right in front of you. So if it's been trauma from your childhood, or you did something, or someone did something to you, somehow this medicine has a way of just putting it in front of your face. And for a lot of people, it scares them, because there's a lot of people, as you probably know, that don't want to know why they're that way. They just like to stay in that groove of misery, right? They rather just take the antidepressant and just say, hey, I'm good. I don't want to know why I'm suffering, or I don't know, why I'm
and that could lead to, obviously, as you said, the prescription of antidepressants that, whether or not they're effective, whether or not people get dependent on them, but that doesn't really get to the crux of it. It could also, if it's not addressed, if that depression or anxiety or trauma is not addressed, it could lead to other substance abuses, like abusing opioids or abusing alcohol or other harder drugs.
Well, absolutely. The thing about SSRIs or antidepressant medicine, once they prescribe, let's just say you start off with 10 milligrams of Zoloft. After a year, you might need 15, then 20, 25. So then you just keep climbing because your body gets used to it. With plant medicine, you do it a weekend, and it has a way of showing you what you needed. You're able to unload that heavy burden that you've been carrying, that sometimes you didn't even know you were carrying. And you're fine. And I'll give you an example. When I left the military in 2013, they prescribed nightmare medicine, mood medicine, anxiety medicine. I was a walking zombie. So then you figure on the weekends, I'm drinking alcohol with my friends. So that just compounds it. And I used to just pray for death. And I've told people that I truly just prayed for God to kill me. I couldn't understand why. And plant medicine, when I stumbled upon it, it didn't replace my faith in God. It strengthened it. And God works in mysterious ways. So if this is a natural plant and something that he's had here for years, and it's made me feel better, well, now I don't take any medicine. And obviously I have a healthy respect with alcohol, and I don't look down upon it, and that's fine, but it's all balance. And yeah, I mean, plant medicine, I mean, I'm living proof that I'm again, sitting here with you talking about how happy I am and whole. And I think if your spirit is broken, then there's truly nothing that can fix it. And I'm not a granola eater by no means. Obviously, I don't have blue hair or any of that stuff, but the Beatles had it right, man. You need some love. You need to get with nature, and that stuff just repairs your body. It's amazing.
We're talking with Eric Lionheart, a decorated Air Force combat controller and founder of the First There Foundation. Want to hear a little bit about that foundation coming up. But to the president's executive order, obviously, there's been red tape in place, the way these particular substances were scheduled by the FDA because of previous administrations decades ago. Do you really feel that this is going to happen? Do you think that the president's order, including that $50 million of taxpayer funds going to states that already have these things set up or are looking to? I know, Washington has a program. Colorado's looking at a program. In Illinois, they're looking at a program to help facilitate this. Do you really think that this is something that's going to happen rapidly, as the president says Saturday he's looking to make happen with his executive order?
Well, with the president, you never know. But I think you needed a conservative president that said, yes, I believe in this. I think we should make it, look into it, review it. Let's expedite it, as he said. And he has some heavy weight, talking to Bobby Kennedy up there. And I think it will. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, maybe in a year and a half. But I mean, that's great. And now that it's coming even more mainstream that we're talking about plant medicine, it doesn't have that negative taboo to it, that negative connotation. So I think it'll be a lot faster than people expect, for sure.
What are you hearing from the veteran community? Obviously, you've shared your story, right? Have you worked with and helped others find this? And where are you finding it? Are you having to travel outside of the country to actually tap into these types of treatments?
Well, the veteran community, like I said on Saturday, people were just blowing up my phone telling about how great this is. And we have treated people through our flagship program called Operation Soul Rescue. And I had a friend of mine in the last ceremony we took him on. He was going to kill himself, and he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, man, if this doesn't work for me, I'm doing this out of respect for you. But if this doesn't work, I'm checking out as soon as we get back." This time we went to Mexico, but yeah, we have a facilitator that administers the medicine. There is a loophole, if you will, under the Religious Act here, where you can take it because it's a sacrament, right? The freedom of religion. But yeah, as far as the veteran community, they're excited because if you figure for the last 50 years, as you said, everybody's just been on the usual, right? You talk to your psychologist, you take your antidepressant medicine, and you're just living life in this Groundhog Day. And now that you have this other tool that people are bringing up to the forefront, then it'll just help get it out there. And if people can take it and then change their lives in a weekend or maybe two, then I mean, the ripple effects of having someone that's solid and whole, it's going to be amazing, right? I mean, my biggest marker for our foundation is like, if we can change the lives of one person, that's one mom, one dad, it doesn't matter, it'll ripple down the line. So that's successful for us.
Well, I definitely want you to share a little bit more about the First There Foundation, but to those who may have concerns of psychedelics becoming habit forming, is that something, especially like with ibogaine? Is that something that's habit forming? Is the experience you have 6 to hours or so of a ayahuasca journey, as you called it? Is that something that's habit forming?
No, I don't think.
And why not? Why not? Why isn't it habit forming?
Yeah, because it's like I said earlier, it's the most terrifying and beautiful thing I've ever done. But no, it's not. For example, when people drink alcohol, they drink it and they feel good and they're buzzing and they're dancing, whatever it may be. So they do it every weekend or however often, and it becomes habit. It becomes a habit. When you do this type of medicine, it is No, I think if someone abused it, now can people abuse it? Sure, you can abuse anything, but no, it's not habit forming. And when you talk about the journey lasting 46 hours, it's not like you're laying there screaming your eyes out. I mean, some of it might show you things from your childhood that you really loved, or it'll show you. For me, it was a lot of my dead friends that were killed in action, and I just got to chat with them and say, "Hey, man, I love you, and it was good to see you, and I'm sorry that this happened." It just helps repair the soul. But no, it's not habit forming. Now, there's a lot of people that now, as this hits the mainstream more, I'm sure there's going to be some bad actors that are going to take it and say, "Hey, I can give it to you," and just administer, but it should be respected, and it's very sacred for sure.
And again, it looks like at least what the president's looking to do is to facilitate and fund certain programs that have that facilitation, where it's not just giving it to somebody, it's under a very controlled psychotherapy type of setting, where there's going to be administrators and then some analysis and talk therapy afterwards. And this is kind of the what we've seen being proposed in different states that are looking to do this. So it'll be interesting to watch this. Eric Lionheart, of course, greatly appreciate you being here. Tell us about the First There Foundation.
Yeah, well, thank you. First There was born out of necessity because a friend of mine and teammate killed himself 6 months after leaving the teams. And then 2 months later, another teammate of ours was going to do the same thing. And again, like I said, Operation Soul Rescue, you got to repair the soul. And we treat people with plant medicine, mainly ayahuasca and psilocybin, where they can get in there and figure out what their trauma is. It's life changing. We need obviously your viewers and people's help because we're a small nonprofit, but I think with the president's message, we're going to get a lot more people to look into us and hopefully help us fundraise, because that's what we need to take care of these individuals. But it's a great thing that allows people to have joy in their lives.
Eric Lionheart, hopefully we can talk about this a little bit later on as we see this continue to unfold. Greatly appreciate you taking the time with us. All right, now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Firearms policy being discussed across the country in state houses and in the Congress. Now in Minnesota, you've got Senate Majority Leader Erin Murphy saying that she wants to see a holistic approach to addressing gun violence in that state. And she said that includes regulating firearms.
I think it is really important that we take a comprehensive approach. And I hear my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, talking about that as well. But they call comprehensive an approach that talks about school safety and perhaps mental health care, but they don't want to talk about the weapons of war. If we listen to the families who've experienced what they've experienced this past summer, it is important that we address all three, and we're going to address all three. I don't want to leave this session without progress on this topic.
Now, what exactly addressing, quote, weapons of war will look like, we'll be watching out of that state, but there are other proposals across the country in California, Illinois, and beyond that go further to regulate the possession of firearms, what kinds of firearms, and just exactly where you can possess those firearms. But other states looking to go the other direction to give gun owners more freedom, and states typically are looking to allow people to carry firearms in certain areas, or to even lower the age of who can have a handgun. But again, these are all in the various states across the country dealing with firearms legislation. But in the U.S. Congress, Democrats continue to criticize the Trump administration, and in particular, you have Representative Jim McGovern, ranking member of the Rules Committee, asking a Trump official about last year's tax cuts policy that impacted certain segments of the firearms community.
And in this bill, you also got rid of the nearly 100-year-old tax on gun silencers and sawed-off shotguns. This is what I call the hitman handout. That's not mentioned in this bill either. So how did Republicans pay for all of these, kind of handouts? By imposing the largest ever cut to Medicaid, $1 trillion, and the largest ever cut to the Affordable Care Act and SNAP by adding $4.7 trillion to our national debt. But the resolution that kind of caused all that you guys are patting yourself on the back about doesn't mention any of that. Nothing. I mean, I don't think, am I missing something here?
No, I think you're straight on your talking points. That's what we wanted to say, and I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
I don't agree with you.
But these are-
I've actually lived the previous 4 years under the previous
this is not my-
administration.
Now, that was, of course, one hearing in the Rules Committee and one comment about firearms from a Democrat. In a separate committee in the U.S. Congress, Republicans praised the Trump administration's focus on protecting the Second Amendment. Here is U.S. Representative Andrew Clyde.
Within the president's budget, I noticed something new, a new initiative focused on the Second Amendment. $1.4 million to a new office within the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division dedicated to protecting the Second Amendment from unlawful infringement. I say finally, and thank you. We are beginning to comply with our Declaration of Independence regarding the protection of unalienable rights endowed by our Creator. And it goes on to say, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That means our government is supposed to secure the rights endowed by the Creator. And this, finally, we have an office to secure one of the most incredible rights that we have, and that is the right to keep and bear arms, the Second Amendment of our United States Constitution. So my question to you is, how do we best ensure that this office is aggressive in protecting the Second Amendment and will never allow it to become an office of gun control infringing on this critical constitutional right?
Well, thanks for the question. I think part of that is to trust the team that the president has that envisioned this office, and then to continue to make sure that we give progress reports to the Appropriations Committee for those who have a great interest in this area, and to make sure that over the long haul, that culture does not become completely reversed to that which what it was set up to do.
Would it help if we codified some of that?
I think that would be a great idea, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll work on it. Thank you.
So the idea, having in the Department of Justice, for example, a agency that focuses on Second Amendment rights and the preservation of those rights, that being a Trump administration initiative. What happens if a new president comes in 2029? Could they gut that office? Obviously something to watch closely. But something else that gun owners are watching closely is autonomous weapons being implemented by the U.S. military. In a separate House committee dealing with the military's budgets, Congressman John Carter discussed this issue of autonomous weaponry with Daniel Driscoll, Secretary of the Department of the Army.
To be specific, in my district, there's a company that's developed an autonomous weapon system called the Bulldog that has demonstrated real promise in countering low-cost, fast-moving drone threats.
We've had the Bullfrog team into the office a couple of times under JIATA 401 that General Laniv referenced. They have tested it. The key to a future successful air defense is layered solutions at different varying degrees of cost. There may be times where you want to use a couple $1 million Patriot interceptor because the risk is so high, but you strongly prefer to use something like the Bullfrog, which is just a round fired at a threat. And for the Shahed drones, that round is really effective if you can get it to the right place. And what technology is doing is a human being would have a pretty hard time reacting quickly enough to a drone swarm to be able to use that tool, where technology with AI is probably there. And so very specifically to your question, Judge, we are testing Bullfrog.
Interesting to hear how that testing goes and just how much of your U.S. tax dollars are being used on those things. And that's just some of what America is talking about. You can get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. And you can join us back here Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from across the country, only with the Center Square Daily.